Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Climax After Dark. We are so lucky tonight to have Christina with us from Free Life. And we're talking about finding joy in the present. We're at the time of the year where we get to celebrate the holidays and be around family and friends, but also this time, even though it can bring much joy, it can also bring a lot of anxiety. And so we need to find joy in our present state of being. We'll be going over substance use, intimacy, and how to maintain holiday mindfulness. Christina, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I'm hoping that you can just talk to our guests tonight about your path and what led you to open your organization, what your organization does. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you again for letting me be here. So I'm sober from an addiction to alcohol. I will be 4 years sober February 3rd, which is wild. Thank you. I feel like time went in a warp with the pandemic and all the things. I got sober at the
Mhm.
beginning of the pandemic. But fast forward 4 years, I after I got sober, I felt very isolated because a lot of my friendships were based around drinking, bars, and that whole scene. So when you get sober, you're like, well, okay, can't go to those places anymore. So now what do I do?
Mhm.
And so I founded Free Life, which is an organization that does peer recovery, and we do alcohol-free events to bring together people and just to help them find a life without substances and create intentional community, and also just show people that like life is so exciting when you give up drinking. There's this misconception that like if you stop drinking, your life is over, that things are
Mhm.
boring. Could not be further from the truth. So
And I think, that brings a great point. There's a misconception that leaving a situation, leaving one community that you may be used to, makes you isolated and prevents you from joining another community, which is not the truth at all.
so true.
And I think it's really important for us to remember, especially in this time of the holiday season, um, that the places that we need to be may be different than those that we care for.
Yeah.
How can practicing mindfulness during this season help us maintain a healthy relationship um, with
Yeah.
others that we love in our intimate relationships, and then also with just our behaviors?
Yeah, I love that question. So, mindfulness is still a huge part of my recovery today. I think often we make mindfulness a little more complicated than it has to be. Like we think we have to meditate, that it has to be like a step. But really, honestly, mindfulness is just being aware of the present moment and ourselves in that moment. So, mindfulness to me is well, one, it makes me aware of my triggers. So, whatever my triggers may be, my triggers used to be stress, anxiety. I mean, who doesn't deal with that right now? But mindfulness means me being in my present body and feeling the sensations of when again, the anxiety, the heart palpitation. So, that helps me. And then that also helps me be a better partner as well.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not taking care of myself, then I'm not showing up for the people that my loved ones or my husband in the correct way. So honestly, like I feel like mindfulness like goes across the gamut.
Yeah, yeah. Across the board, we
Yeah.
say self care is not selfish. It
Mm,
actually is helping, those not around you, not just you and those that you love, you being a better person and being able to present as your best self.
yes.
During this time of the year, we oftentimes think about those that we have lost
Yeah.
or issues that we've gone through the year that have created a sense of loss. And we can use substances to help mask how we feel. As I've been walking through this journey of my practice being focused on sexual health, I'm also seeing more and more women and men too use substances, alcohol, drugs, also to help them in their sexual relationships or what they believe to help them in their sexual relationships.
Hmm.
What are some strategies that you know of that we can use as people to stay more present and avoid the temptation if we're struggling with that temptation for using substances in excess or at
Yeah.
all during this holiday season?
So I think, I mean, we discussed mindfulness, but I cannot put enough of an emphasis on community, right? Or an
Mhm.
accountability partner. So a lot of so getting sober during the holidays is like a really hard thing to do. But I would say I still use it to this day. Having someone in
Mhm.
your corner that knows that, hey, I'm struggling right now, or hey,
Mhm.
I am going to this party. I use this trick all the time. When I would go to a party, I would have my husband or a friend on speed dial or texting me at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., just setting a time to check
Mhm.
in. So I
Mhm.
knew that they were going to call. And so then I'd step out of the room or text or whatever and be like, hey, I'm still sober. I'm doing okay. But
Mhm.
having
Mhm.
someone in your corner or even with you at the event, and if they can't be with you, which happens, having someone knowing that you're at an event where you may drink or you're having a hard day, like really reaching out and telling someone, because then it's a fail safe, right? Because it's an
Yeah.
accountability, right? Because it's someone loving, someone that you want, someone that you can trust, obviously, that's going to be kind to you, right? But being
Mhm.
having someone, because if we just try to do this ourselves, it's a lot harder than it has to be.
Yeah. Community is accountability.
Yeah.
And I
Ooh, I
think
love that.
in our country we've lost that aspect of understanding the importance of community,
Mm,
um, and helping help having those that we love help us keep ourselves accountable. But then on the other end, you love someone, so being part of their community is reaching out, is making them accountable, for their actions. I wonder if we took that and spread that out a little bit,
yeah,
in this world and in this country, where would we fare?
for real. Yeah, I completely agree.
So, you always have to have an alternative. Just like you said, this is a hard time to switch modalities, switch your normal routine. I
Yeah.
always say the holiday season is not the time to try to lose weight. It's
I
not the
agree
time
completely.
to really start a brand new action without like weighing yourself in or having a plan, mapping out a
Mhm.
plan. What alternatives do you suggest people use to help
Yeah.
celebrate and also like create meaningful experiences? Because we really associated alcohol with celebration,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
what we're talking about is that you don't have to do that. There's different ways
Mm-mm.
to celebrate. So how do we kind of break that down
Yeah.
and evolve past using
Yeah.
alcohol or even drugs or whatever our vice is to
Yeah.
celebrate.
That's a great question. So there's two things here. The thing is, so it depends on where you're at in your stage of recovery and
Mhm.
drinking, but there are so many good non-alcoholic options for us that you can still celebrate, and like the ritual of cheersing, like
Mhm.
so I would set, like, if you're local, like Hampton Roads has a dry bar like in a shop called
Mhm.
Ceremony,
Mhm. Mhm.
all non-alcoholic drinks. So there's always that option. And mocktails are super fun. You can Google any kind of mocktail. So I mean, we can still cheers in like the ritual part of things. But the other part that I'm finding is that we just need to create new things, right? So like that's what
Mhm.
I've had to do. And that's the most, I love being an entrepreneur for that reason, because they always say like just build it. If you don't see it, build it. And so
Mhm.
what does that look like for you? Because you don't celebrate in the old ways that you used to, right?
Mhm.
Or ways
Mhm.
that kept us stuck. So what does a New Year's look like? Like I do that now. I have a sober New Year's party at my house, right? I do birthday
Mhm.
party, like I do all kinds of events. They're just different and restructured without alcohol, and they're
Mhm. Mhm.
finding new places and spaces, and and it's reimagining things, because you if you once we've left something, we're a new person. So we need new
Yeah.
things to keep up with that.
Yeah. One of the things I've told you in the past when we've talked privately is that I admire about you is that you are very open,
Mm,
with the process that you have gone through and that you continue to go through. And again, that's that sense of needed in that sense of community to bring others along because there's a lot of us are out here struggling,
mhm.
um, and we as individuals, but again, those that we love because they're
Yeah.
struggling, they're also feeling the struggle that we are going through, or
Mhm.
we're maybe going through, and that can hurt them as individuals. Um, how can a couple support one another? Like, what are after going through this with your husband,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What are some tips that you um, or some things that you learned on going through it that would help those who are supporting individuals in addiction?
Yeah. I mean, this is a loaded, how much time do we have? But no, it's hard. It's hard. And I think the first thing is, if I'm coming from the perspective of the caregiver or the partner or whatever, the loved one loving someone with an addiction, is acknowledging that it is hard, that what you are doing is hard, right? So because so often I think the caregivers are like, they're doing so many things, and you kind of, you gaslight yourself into saying it's not that bad, or so just acknowledging that what you're dealing with is hard. And then learning boundaries. Oh my goodness. I mean, boundaries, I broke a million of them, and it's still something that I'm learning to this day, but like, it's a fine line, and it's going to look different in every relationship and where whatever that is, but like, knowing what your boundary is with that person, and when they cross it, saying no and sticking to them. It is very difficult to stick to boundaries, especially with someone dealing with active addiction. But what I found is that when we don't have boundaries, resentment builds up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then also the other big thing is communicating with that person the harm that is being done. Because I know for so long I was in my active addiction, and I knew a little bit, but it wasn't until my husband really said, like, you're hurting us and our family, that I wasn't able, and so I
Yeah.
saw it and I was like, oh boy. So
Yeah.
honesty.
Well, and coming from that person's perspective, right? There's a lot of guilt that's going back and forth, you
Mm-hmm.
know, from the one who's in addiction and the one who is the close relation, fit friend.
Yeah.
Um, and it's hard to forgive yourself, especially when you don't necessarily understand what you're forgiving yourself of.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but would you say that bringing in maybe a third party to help mediate, and then how do you do that?
Yeah.
If you're the person that you love is not willing or really willing to understand or has the capacity to understand what they're doing and how
Yeah.
it's hurting and how it's breaking down the relationship.
Yeah. Well, I will say, as someone, my family did an intervention on me 4 years ago around this time, and I did not receive it well. I stormed out. And so I can't give you like, here's 3 steps. Here's how, because for everyone's addiction, for everyone's experience, it's so different. But yes, it can be very helpful to have a third person, someone that's loving, that knows the situation, come in and say, I would say the biggest thing to do is be as factual as possible, um, and not like blaming, right? Like saying, sticking to, here's the situation and here's how it's impacting us. Because that way you're not going back and forth and saying, like, oh, you did this and you did this. And it's more of like, we're concerned for your safety. And here's how what the actions that you are doing are impacting us.
I think, what we do is understand that it's an honest truth. It's an honest truth
Hmm.
that we're having to live in. And there's
Hmm.
some a level of vulnerability there's a level of vulnerability that we'll have to um, be comfortable with.
Yeah.
And on both ends, it's going to be hard, and both ends, it's going to be challenging.
Yeah.
Um, Can you tell us more about Free Life, like some of the
Yeah.
activities that you all have coming up? We have an activity actually coming up together, an event coming up,
Yes. I'm so
our Dry
excited.
January event.
Yeah.
And we're going to be tackling this conversation, tackling this issue about specifically intimacy and substance use. Again, like I alluded to earlier, there are a lot of people who, before they engage in sex with their partner, they feel like they need to be under an influence. And
Yeah.
that influence, and maybe that's to help relax their bodies, relax their minds, get them in the mood. But it's not really helping that connection with their partner.
Right.
And I can talk about the physiology also on the other end. It's actually not helping the orgasm and actually
Mm.
prevents the orgasm from really being able to be achieved at its peak level.
Mm.
So we have that event happening in January, and we'll both
Yes.
be having it on our socials. But can you tell us more about what you all have going
Yeah,
on?
for sure. And I'm really excited about that event because I think, I know that it's something that I struggled with and then didn't talk about, because like we talked about this, but we have two topics, right? Where it's sex and then
Mhm.
addiction, and it's like, it's just hard to talk about both, right? So this is a great event. So yes, we have that one coming up. But so yes, I do wide variety of events because what I'm trying to do is attack addiction and getting sober holistically. So we do
Hmm.
mind, body, spirit. And so
Hmm.
all of our events try to fit into one of those buckets. But coming up, we have more of what I would call the social fun. On December 8th, we're going to Ceremony, which is a dry bar
Hmm.
in Norfolk. And we are partnering with City Girls Walk. They are what it
Hmm.
sounds like. They're a group of women that walk weekly
Hmm.
for health and community. And then the Norfolk Cold Plunge. And if you haven't heard of them, they're incredible. They cold plunge in the ocean once a week. Um, but yes, so we're bringing all three communities together to meet, to talk, to just hang out. It's not gender specific at Ceremony, and that's December 8th from 7 to
Okay.
10. Yep.
Okay.
And then
You
December
know,
6th. Oh, go
mhm.
ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
December 6th, we're doing a this is one's fun, bungee jumping, ascend bungee jumping workout class. I know. I'm like scared, so when fingers crossed I'll be
Is that
okay. But
indoor or outside?
it's indoor and you're in a
Okay.
harness and it's like you're bungee jumping to like a playlist. So you're like dancing, not jumping. You're like on the ground, but like you're like bouncing and
Mhm.
dancing and
Okay.
so mocktails. It'll be fun. So December 6th and 8th.
Wow.
I know.
I think that's something that I'd love to do. And,
Yeah.
again, bringing different organizations together, different communities together, because this is a topic that we all, many people are dealing with, whether you're dealing with it as the person who has the addiction or you're dealing with it as a friend or family member. And so
Yeah.
having this open community where there is no judgment.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing I'd like people to know. When
Yeah.
you are going through a difficult time in your life, it makes it harder when you feel that you're being judged.
Mm,
But being able to put that aside, those feelings inside, or being in community where there's no judgment is actually what helps you along your road um, to and through recovery.
yeah. Oh
And
my gosh.
so we have to really like put um, away our opinions or our misconceptions or whatever
Yeah.
that may be perceived as judgment, and just have more of like open mind, open arms approach when we're having these discussions.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll share the work of Kristen Neff. She does self-compassion. And so if anyone, no one's ever heard of it, I would highly, highly recommend Googling self-compassion because it changed my life. And it's basically the
Hmm.
idea of what it sounds like being kind to yourself. You're
Hmm.
aware of what you've done and what's happened, but it's being
Hmm.
kind to yourself and realistically holding yourself accountable, but giving yourself that grace, right? And
Hmm.
self-compassion helped me get through a lot of the shame and the guilt I had around addiction. And it's how I can show up and be so vulnerable. Like you mentioned, like it's been a lot of work, but I mean it's how I can share because I love myself today. I love myself so much.
If you had one thing to tell yourself,
Mm,
the who you were, right,
yeah.
before, what is that one thing that you would say?
Oh gosh, what a powerful question. Um, mm, um, you're okay.
Yeah.
Like you're okay. You're not broken. You may
Yeah.
be going through a rough time,
Yeah.
but you're okay just as you are.
Yeah. And your story will and will continue to
Yes.
inspire others. We have below going through how people can get in contact with you
Mm,
from your socials, your email, and your phone number. Can you just say your email for us out loud?
yeah, absolutely. So it's my first name, Christina,
Mhm.
Christina, at freelifellc.com.
Okay, great. So listen, if you're there out there and you know someone who is going through addiction or
Hmm.
has navigated and is currently in their early stages of recovery,
Yep.
please get in contact with Christina's organization. No matter where you are, where we're reaching you from, right,
Yep.
Christina?
Yeah.
Location doesn't have a boundary for community and communication.
So true.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh,
You
thank
all
you.
come out and see us in January with our dry event. We'll be
Yes.
sending out more information about that event. And then you can also reach out to Christina on her socials, Free Life LLC, to learn
Yep.
more about their December events. Christina, thank you so much for
Thank
coming on.
you.
I
This was so
appreciate
great.
you.
Absolutely.
This this is Climax After Dark.